At the grandest wedding of the year, where everyone was dressed in glitter and joy, one woman sat quietly in the corner. She wasn't just any woman. She was a powerful CEO, admired in boardrooms, but forgotten in the ballroom. Her wheelchair didn't define her, but tonight it made her invisible. No one dared to ask her for a dance. Until a single dad walked up, looked into her eyes, and said 5 words that changed everything. "Will you be my date?" What happened next silenced the entire hall. The wedding hall glittered under golden chandeliers, laughter echoing from every corner as music filled the air. Couples twirled on the dance floor, their joy radiating like sparks of light. Every table was alive with conversation, every guest glowing with the excitement of celebration. Yet in the middle of all that warmth and noise, there was a corner that felt painfully quiet. And in that corner sat a woman who was admired by thousands in the world outside, yet unnoticed by almost everyone inside this hall tonight. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, a woman of immense strength, elegance, and influence. Her tailored navy gown shimmered under the lights, her posture dignified, her presence commanding. But still, most people chose to pass her by with just a fleeting glance, as though her wheelchair somehow diminished her worth in their eyes. She sat with a smile that tried to look effortless, though deep inside, her heart carried the sting of silence. People had clinked glasses and toasted near her, yet few had stopped to include her. They whispered, some out of pity, others out of discomfort, but never out of genuine curiosity to know her beyond the chair she sat in. She was used to such glances. Boardrooms, conferences, and public events had often taught her that people admired her brilliance but stumbled when it came to seeing her humanity. Tonight, that same lesson repeated itself. The music shifted into a romantic tune, couples rushing to the dance floor hand in hand. She watched as the bride and groom led the first steps, their smiles brighter than the stars outside. The crowd cheered, the floor filled, and laughter grew louder. For her, though, the sound was a reminder that she was on the outside looking in, just a spectator to a celebration that seemed to forget her. She gently adjusted her hands on her lap, trying to mask the ache of loneliness behind the mask of composure. Then, out of nowhere, a small sound broke through the melody of the hall, a little boy's laughter. He dashed across the room, weaving between tables, clutching a small toy car that slipped from his hands and rolled toward her feet. The boy skidded to a stop, his eyes wide with a mix of panic and mischief. She bent forward and picked up the car, holding it out with a soft smile. For the first time that evening, someone looked at her, not with hesitation, not with judgment, but with the pure innocence of a child. His eyes sparkled as he reached for the toy, his smile contagious. In that brief moment, something inside her shifted. It was as if the boy had reminded her that she was still seen, still acknowledged, still part of the world that seemed so far from her tonight. She handed him the car gently, and he whispered a shy, "Thank you," before dashing back, only to bump into a man making his way across the room. The man was dressed simply compared to the others, his suit not as polished, his tie a little loose, but his presence carried a calm strength. He crouched to his son's level, murmuring something softly before glancing up at her. His eyes met hers, and unlike the others in the hall, his gaze didn't flicker with discomfort. There was no pity, no hesitation, just warmth, gratitude, and respect. He offered a genuine smile as he held his son's hand and walked closer. "Thank you for picking that up," he said, his voice steady and sincere. She nodded, her smile faint but real this time, a little surprised that he had chosen to approach her when so many others hadn't. The boy clung to his father's hand, peeking up at her with curiosity, his toy car safe once again in his grip. For a moment silence lingered between them, not the heavy kind she had felt all evening, but a comfortable pause that felt strangely refreshing. The sound of laughter and music continued all around, but this small exchange felt like its own private world, tucked away in the corner of a crowded hall. She didn't know it yet, but this fleeting encounter was about to change the entire course of her night, and perhaps even her life. The man remained standing beside her for a few seconds, his son holding tightly to his hand, eyes shifting curiously between his father and the elegant woman in the wheelchair. The air around them felt different, less like the suffocating weight of pity she had endured all evening and more like a gentle acknowledgement that she was simply another guest at this celebration. She found herself straightening slightly, as though his presence had nudged her to remember that she was not invisible. "You have a wonderful smile," the man said suddenly, his tone casual but sincere. It caught her off guard. People often commented on her business acumen, her success, her speeches, but rarely, so rarely, on something as personal as her smile. She let out a small laugh, a soft surprise sound she hadn't expected to make tonight. "Thank you," she replied, her voice calm but carrying a warmth she hadn't felt all day. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Daddy, can I show her my car?" His father looked down with an amused expression before nodding. The child proudly rolled the little toy across the floor, and she leaned forward, watching with genuine interest. For once, she wasn't the CEO or the lonely guest in the corner. She was simply a woman enjoying a child's simple joy. As the boy played, the man pulled out the chair beside her and sat down without hesitation. His gesture stunned her more than his words. All evening, chairs near her had remained empty, as if people were afraid that sitting too close would obligate them to a conversation they didn't want to have. Yet here was this man, sitting like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Weddings can feel overwhelming sometimes," he said, glancing at the dance floor where couples swayed in rhythm. "All this noise, all these expectations. It can make someone feel out of place." His words touched her more deeply than he could have known. She looked at him with cautious curiosity. "And do you feel out of place?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes. I don't come from the kind of world most of these people do. I'm just a mechanic, single dad, working to give my son a good life. This," he gestured to the sparkling hall, "isn't really my scene." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. There was no arrogance in his tone, no attempt to impress her, no subtle comparison of status, just honesty. And somehow, that honesty felt more refreshing than all the polished compliments she had heard from high-level executives in her daily life. "And yet," she said softly, "you still chose to come." He nodded. "Because family matters more than feeling out of place. My cousin is the bride. She's like a sister to me. I couldn't miss her big day. Even if I sit in the corner most of the night, it doesn't matter, as long as she's happy." His words lingered with her, stirring something she hadn't expected. For years, she had lived in a world where success was measured in numbers and achievements, where appearances and reputation weighed more than sincerity. Yet here was a man who measured life by love, loyalty, and simple presence. She found herself asking questions, eager to know more about him and his son. He answered with humility, never boasting, never exaggerating. His stories weren't glamorous, but they were real. Stories of fixing cars late at night, of cooking simple dinners at home, of bedtime routines filled with laughter and stubborn refusals to sleep. She listened, captivated not by grandeur, but by the authenticity that dripped from every word. Then the music shifted again, and couples began to gather on the dance floor for another round. The bride twirled in her gown, the groom gazed at her with eyes full of love, and the crowd cheered. The man looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. Something flickered in his gaze, something she hadn't seen all evening. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was courage. He leaned slightly closer, his voice lower but steady. "You know," he said, "I was going to just thank you for helping my son and walk away. But now I don't want to walk away." She blinked, surprised. "Why not?" "Because," he said, his smile widening just enough to soften his words, "you don't deserve to sit here alone. Not tonight. Not ever." Before she could respond, he extended his hand toward her. His son looked up, eyes gleaming with excitement, sensing something important. The hall buzzed with laughter and chatter, but around them, time seemed to pause. His voice, steady and kind, carried the words that would silence the whispers of the room and shift the night into something unforgettable. "Would you," he asked gently but boldly, "be my date tonight?" The words hung in the air like a spark, daring her to believe that perhaps this night didn't have to end the way it had begun. The world seemed to freeze around her as his hand hovered in the air, waiting for her answer. For a moment, the familiar doubt rushed in. The voices that had followed her for years, whispering that people saw her chair before they saw her. She glanced around the hall, noticing how eyes had already turned toward them, curiosity buzzing like static in the air. Whispers floated from table to table, subtle but sharp. The powerful CEO, sitting alone all night, now being asked out by a man who looked nothing like the wealthy, polished guests. The contrast was almost too much for them to process, but when she looked back at him, the noise of the hall faded. His eyes didn't hold judgment or pity. They weren't asking if she could do this or if she wanted to. They were simply offering an invitation, not an obligation. His son clutched the toy car and beamed at her with the kind of encouragement only a child could give, as if the answer was already obvious. She took a deep breath, then placed her hand in his. Her fingers trembled slightly, but his grip was warm, steady, and reassuring. A collective gasp rippled through the room. People leaned in, expecting him to pull her toward the dance floor. But instead, he did something no one anticipated. He pulled a chair next to hers, sat down, and said with a playful grin, "If the world can't make space for us on their floor, we'll make our own right here." The boy laughed and clapped, his joy filling the silence that had briefly fallen. The father began moving gently with the rhythm of the music, swaying his shoulders, tapping his foot, making it look as though they were dancing, just in their own way, their own space. At first she was startled, unsure of how to react. But then, slowly, she allowed herself to move along with him, swaying her upper body to the beat, letting the music flow through her. Together they created a dance that was theirs alone, beautiful not because it followed tradition, but because it defied it. One by one, the whispers began to quiet. Instead of judgment, something else spread across the hall. People began clapping along with the boy. The bride, noticing the scene, smiled so wide it lit up her face. She tugged on her groom's hand, and together they applauded, setting off a ripple of support. Soon the entire hall was watching, not in discomfort but in awe. Her heart swelled, her eyes glistening as she realized what was happening. For years, she had built walls around herself, walls made of pride, walls that protected her from the sting of exclusion. Tonight, for the first time, someone had climbed those walls not out of pity, but out of genuine respect and kindness. He hadn't asked her to leave her chair behind or to prove herself. He had simply chosen to sit beside her, to share her world, to meet her where she was. As the music reached its peak, she felt something break free inside her. The loneliness, the heaviness, the quiet ache she had carried, all of it loosened in that moment. She laughed, a sound so pure and unrestrained that it surprised even her. The man looked at her, smiling as though her joy was the only thing that mattered in the world. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. The entire hall was on its feet, clapping, cheering, celebrating not just the newlyweds, but the courage of two souls who had turned a corner into a stage and silence into music. She wiped away a tear, her chest rising with emotions too vast to contain. He leaned closer, his voice low, steady, almost like a secret meant only for her. "You deserve to be seen, not for your chair, not for your title, but for you." The words pierced through her like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had heard countless compliments in her life, but none had ever reached this deeply. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a CEO trying to prove herself. She didn't feel like a woman defined by a chair. She felt simply human, worthy of love, worthy of joy, worthy of being chosen. Her hand lingered in his, her heart racing not with fear, but with possibility. She looked at him, then at his son, and realized something she had never admitted to herself before. Success had filled her days, but it had never filled her nights. She had conquered the business world, but she had never allowed herself to conquer loneliness. Tonight, in the unlikeliest of places, and with the unlikeliest of people, she had found something far greater than success, connection. And as she smiled through her tears, she knew this wasn't just a fleeting moment at a wedding. It was the beginning of a story she never thought she deserved, but had secretly longed for all along. As the applause faded and the music softened, she looked at the man still holding her hand and realized something profound. Life had spent years reminding her of what she lacked, but tonight had shown her what she truly deserved. Not pity, not distance, not loneliness, but love, respect, and a place beside someone who saw her, not her chair, not her title, but her. She smiled through tears, whispering softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "For the first time, I feel seen." And in that moment, surrounded by people who had once looked away, she found what she had been searching for all her life. Not success, not wealth, but connection. This was not just the end of a lonely night. It was the beginning of a love story that defied expectations, silenced judgment, and proved one simple truth. Real love has no boundaries.